Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Theo Von, a couple people have been talking about recently that at a taping of a special that people had attended, he apparently bombed completely and like didn't remember his own material, and the whole thing kind of flubbed. This was something that a couple people posted about on the internet, and there was a lot of speculation about it. Theo Von has obviously become a hot topic within comedy because of his sort of association with the Trump administration, willingness to help them during the campaign, his kind of willingness to play the useful idiot when it comes to politics. And so for him to have this kind of public failure at the special taping, it kind of confirmed a lot of people's thoughts that, you know, this is like the hack world of comedians. And there may be more to it than that. What I mostly find interesting about this is that Theo Von kind of tied in a couple of the political situations happening. There was also another incident where DHS used a video of Theo Von in one of their like Nazi propaganda videos about deporting any and everyone that they can. And Theo Von was upset that they used the video. I'll play that for you real quick right now.
Heard you got deported, dude. Bye.
They simply stopped coming. They're not coming anymore. We're getting a lot of credit, but they're not coming anymore.
That was the video that originally Theo Von had recorded just the part of him speaking, and then they edited it. This is like a popular meme format. I know it's bizarre looking, but it's meant to be the kind of juxtaposition between the peaceful music and something kind of intense that's being said. So, you know, they're just memeing. They've been doing this propaganda effort since Trump came into office, just using sort of lighthearted memes in a very dark way, a knowingly dark way. So Theo Von said he doesn't want anything to do with that. And a lot of people obviously pointed out the hypocrisy of this, because Theo Von not only supported Trump and his administration and J.D. Vance coming on his podcast, but also has been pretty open about his support of Trump's immigration policy. And as he said in response to DHS using his video, he says, "My views are more nuanced than this video allows." So, having said all that, let's listen to what Theo Von said. He came out and addressed the fact that he bombed this special, and he ties it in with other news stories that are going on in kind of an interesting way. So, let's listen to what he had to say about it.
So I had a comedy special that we were taping. We were taping it last week, and about a month before I quit taking some antidepressants I was taking. You know, I just kind of self-weaned myself off. And the reason why was because I wanted, like during the comedy show, I wanted to have a little bit more emotion during it. So I'm getting a ton of hateful stuff, and I'm trying to remember everything. I'm trying to kind of remember everything right now. And but this video goes everywhere, and I'm getting like a lot of like, dude, what the fuck? Just all kind of shit, right? Like my phone just blew. I'm like, what the hell? It's just like the last thing I needed, right? There's a week left to this special, and this happens. You know, this thing comes out. And my father immigrated here from Nicaragua, right? Like one of my prized possessions is I have his immigration papers when he came here. And I have him in a frame, and him and his siblings when they came here. And so I have tons of thoughts about it, but this was just fucked up, right? It was fucked up. And it was everywhere. It was like on all platforms and stuff. So that had me really kind of paranoid. You know, that had me start to get kind of paranoid and, you know, like closing, like, you know, I had the curtains in my house kind of closed. I was just like, you know, you're paranoid. I woke up the next morning. Sorry, I need some water. I woke up the next morning to a text from a high government official saying, hey, if you need some extra security in your neighborhood or some extra police cars on patrol, let me know. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Extra security? I don't have any, I don't even know the code to my Ring camera. I don't even know how to log in. So it's like, what, you're just going to put police cars in my neighborhood? What are my neighbors going to think? Now they're fearful. It just I don't know, man. That really kind of shook me. It really kind of shook me. So there's just all of that's happening. And then we get to just the job, right? Which is performing, speaking in front of strangers. You had just seen this thing with Charlie Kirk, right? It's we all watch somebody get lit up. We all watch somebody get murdered casually on our phones, right? So I think I started to feel kind of mildly manic. I think it was just being off the medication. I think, and it wasn't insane. It was just little things. The second I got on stage, the first show, I couldn't feel any moisture in my mouth. And I started to feel you ever remember that feeling if you were in high school and you got high and then you were standing there talking to your friends and you were just too high and you were just literally standing there just trying to pretending to be yourself a little bit? So I had a little bit of that going on. And it started off choppy. The first show, it started off kind of choppy. We were doing a new intro with Joey Diaz at the last minute, and he was pretty goomed up. He's Coco, and it was a blessing that he was there, but we hadn't ran through it, and so it just a lot of things at the last minute. But yeah, I'm on stage, and the second half of the first show went good, and there were some beats that I got that had an emotional piece to them that I wanted. And that felt exciting. But the whole show, it was there were parts where I just couldn't remember the next thing. I couldn't remember my next sequence. I was having trouble just keeping track of stuff. And that's when I really was oh man, I'm just off tonight. And then we did the second show, and the second show started out fire. First 22 minutes were cooking, and then I couldn't remember stuff. And we didn't put a teleprompter. We've done it for other specials. We didn't do it. And that was a bad choice. I don't know if I probably made the choice for sure. I don't remember. But so I had to ask for help. I was having to ask off stage because I wanted to get everything in sequence. And I think I got stuck on this sequence thing. And it was just hard, man. It just, I didn't feel like myself.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say, and I don't want to be a dick about this, Theo Von is, I believe, sober and has struggled with substance abuse in the past. And I will say that there are some signs of drug use in what he's saying here in this story. And I'm not saying I know it's that. It also does align what he's saying with so-called manic behavior. But a lot of what he's saying to me sounds like, there's a potential missing piece that could be the explanation for said manic, overexcited, and foggy behavior. He says Joey Diaz is there and he's gooned up, whatever that means. I don't know. And Joey Diaz also has a history with that stuff. And look, as far as I know, both these guys are sober. I hope that's still the case. If it's not, I wish them the best. I'm not trying to get into anybody's personal business, but it does seem a little bit of a stretch the way he's tying these two more political stories into this. He said the thing about Charlie Kirk, which was a few weeks ago at this point, and then even the thing he said about DHS was a week before the special taping, he said. And so there's the other element of that where people from the government were reaching out to him about extra security, and he hired some extra security and just weird shit like that. I can see how that would put a person on edge, but it does seem kind of pointed, especially the way he's pulling the Charlie Kirk story into this. And maybe because it's a special taping, so it felt like a big deal. Look, I get it. Anybody who does any kind of speech, especially political speech, even a little bit. But I think that appealing to those different political issues is kind of a way to divert attention almost. But that being said, I mean, he could be being honest about what he was experiencing at the time. And more so, what I'm interested in getting into here is what he says about immigration and about the surveillance state. So he says that he believes that we are entering a surveillance state and that a lot of what the government is doing is about bookkeeping. And they don't want to have people in the country that are not on the books because they want to be able to surveil everything up and down. So I would say that that's a decent observation. And I want to dig into that a little bit more, because you do see some of these guys dimly wanting to break from Trump on some things. And he talks about how his father came here and he had his father's immigration papers. There's never any acknowledgement from these guys that the immigration system is drastically understaffed. And so people do come here the right way and then aren't able to get into the system for a long time because of the lack of immigration judges. And so that causes them to be undocumented in the country. And so that's what's causing a lot of people to be arrested viciously, brutally, and deported. And you are seeing some people on the right starting to want to distance themselves from that a little bit. To me, this is different from how Theo Von was talking about these issues previously, before they started to see in practice what it looks like to carry out some of these things that the Trump administration was openly saying they were going to do when it was just a campaign. They were saying they were going to do this type of thing. And so now people are seeing videos of it, and Theo Von even sees, his own face being used as sort of an instrument of propaganda for this. And what I would say to Theo Von is that if it's true that Peter Thiel, Palantir, and others are trying to create a surveillance state, right? You're recognizing that immigration and going after so-called illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, in this way is a part of that surveillance state. And it's not just a matter of getting people out who aren't on the books. What it's about is creating a system, a systematized way to arrest, disappear, deport, or maybe do other things to people that the state decides shouldn't be here. And so these corporations that are getting the deals, corporations like Palantir, that are getting the deals to build these surveillance systems, the companies that are getting deals to build private facilities, this is all a necessary feature of an administration whose policy hinges upon allowing corporations like that to balloon completely out of size. A lot of this authoritarian type stuff that we're getting from the Trump administration is stuff that has been fear-mongered about for a long time, is it not? People said George Bush was going to do martial law. People said the same thing about Obama. Obama's creating a surveillance state. He's going to do martial law. And I will admit that both the Bush and Obama administration helped pave the way for what we now know as the surveillance state. But what we are seeing consolidate rapidly under Donald Trump is a corporatized version of this surveillance state. You could also call it a neoliberal version of this surveillance state, because the job of the government is being outsourced to private corporations, which means they have even less oversight than the government has when it does things like spy on you. And so understand that the trick of the Trump administration is to use the idea of illegal immigrants as a grounds to create this surveillance infrastructure and to create the police force that can arrest people violently at will, without identifying themselves, without showing their faces, without any due process, without presenting warrants like they just did in Chicago. They rappelled down from helicopters and pulled everybody in this apartment building out. Every single person. And so who knows what type of information infrastructure went into even targeting that building. But it obviously wasn't enough that they could do so in a way that prevents them from pulling citizens out of their house, in some cases naked children, and throwing them into trucks for hours at a time. So this infrastructure that is being allowed to operate in cities where they are not welcome has been created under the pretense that these criminals in this country are enough of a problem for you that they have to be removed by any means necessary. Meanwhile, most of the people that are being detained by Trump are not criminals at all. They're just undocumented. Because like I said, when you're here in the system, it can take months to years to even get into a courtroom so that you can begin the process of becoming a citizen. And a lot of those people are the ones being rounded up by this surveillance police state that has been created explicitly and rapidly, not by George Bush and not by Barack Obama, but by Donald Trump. And all of this was rather explicit in the campaign promises and the proposals of Donald Trump, as well as the people around him and the things that they were saying loudly. So when Donald Trump and his associates, JD Vance, go on these different podcasts and they talk about immigration, even Elon Musk goes and talks about how immigrants are being bussed into Pennsylvania and swing states to vote for Democrats. All of that was a lie. And the reason they had to lie about that is so that they could get you to turn over your rights to this idea of an invasion of immigrants. And that's the basis on which they've turned you over. Whether it be Theo Von and his image appearing on this video that he didn't give permission to do so, or anybody who's in his audience who's listening to this who may have found themselves voting for or supporting Trump, all of you have been turned over to a guy like Peter Thiel, who wants to police what you have to say about Israel. He wants to police what you have to say about ICE. He wants to police what you have to say about Donald Trump, about Jeffrey Epstein. That was the goal of the Trump administration this entire time. And the problem with Theo Von, and the reason he's probably feeling a lot of anxiety right now surrounding all of these issues, is that he completely failed to assess the cultural reality and political reality of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. And now it's here. And we all have to deal with it. And people like Theo Von and Joe Rogan have to live in a country that is ruled by people that they helped empower. And they know they did it. And they're going to try to dance around it and pretend that they didn't, and pretend that, oh, well, I never took a firm stance. I just wanted to have interesting conversations. But they know they helped. And that's starting to instill a lot of anxiety in them. And so just to follow up on something I mentioned earlier, this raid that happened in Chicago by ICE, they rappelled down into an apartment building and essentially kicked down doors, presented no warrants, dragged people out of their houses. Everybody in this apartment building was arrested. And they did this on the basis that this was Tren de Aragua. So let me play this quick news clip from on the ground where there is active protests in Broadview, where there is a facility that is hosting these ICE agents. Kirsty Noem was there earlier today. She did some kind of photo shoot or something on the roof. They had a production crew up there. And there's been active protests around this building, as there should be, because Chicago is becoming one of the main grounds of resistance against these ICE agents, because this is where they're ramping up these raids. They're doing raids all over, but they can only isolate their resources in certain concentrated ways at certain times, and there's only so much resistance to that they can put up with. So let me play a clip of what's going on there just to give some context of what this raid was like, and then I'll wrap this up.
So, Mayor, let me ask you about the ICE agents that raided this apartment building in Chicago overnight. What more do you know? What can you tell us?
Well, we do know that 37 people were arrested in that overnight raid. That was in a South Side neighborhood here in Chicago. Federal officials tell us that those arrests had to do with a gang, Tren de Aragua members specifically. But we heard from many residents who were there when all this happened overnight, about 3 o'clock in the morning, that those federal agents just took in everyone from those buildings in that apartment, and then they kind of just asked questions later and released people as needed. So that certainly caught a lot of people off guard, and really that's the message of these protesters here right now. Everyone is aware of these federal operations happening in the Chicagoland area, but they just want more answers. We know elected officials here nearby want to get into this ICE facility. They want to get more transparency on those operations and raids that we have seen in the last few days happening in neighborhoods all across the Chicagoland area. But to this point, there just hasn't been that, and that's why these protesters remain out here today, specifically asking guards for more transparency in this entire operation, Kara.
All right, so like I said, they're doing this because they're starting to create an infrastructure through which this can be done to anybody. Because if they can say, this is Tren de Aragua, that's why we did this. They didn't say that till after this happened. So this is a sneak attack on American citizens in an American city, Democrat-run city on American soil. And they are essentially allowed to pull these people out of their house, and you could argue sexually abuse their children, throw them into trucks where they're forced to stand there waiting for hours, and then just say, well, we did it because we were arresting Tren de Aragua. No proof of that has been produced, and there seems to be no burden of proof on these people at all. What that means is that could happen to you for any reason. If all Donald Trump has to say is that this is a Venezuelan gang, so we're gonna blow up this boat in the middle of the ocean, or we're gonna blow up this building on American soil, and doesn't have to produce any proof, that means that could happen to you for any reason. And if that worries you, and if you don't like the idea of Palantir building up its surveillance state, a privately owned surveillance state, if you don't like the idea of ICE being able to kick in the door of any house that they want to because they say there are illegal immigrants there, then now is the time that you can apply some pressure to your elected representative because of the government shutdown. So they're negotiating a budget bill right now, in large part, that funds ICE and the building of the facilities that immigrants and anybody else that they arrest is going to be taken to and potentially deported from, but also in many cases probably forced to work at. And all of that is going to be appropriated to the government once this bill gets passed, if it gets passed. Right now, what the shutdown is happening over is healthcare. There are some provisions that Republicans are cutting out of healthcare that will also probably affect you. But no one in government is talking about ICE. None of our elected representatives are talking about not funding ICE. And as we're seeing these insane raids happen, and it's becoming more clear to people how this is affecting their own rights, even though it should concern them that they're doing this to anybody, now is the time that you can contact your representative and try to get them to talk about this, especially in relation to this budget bill. Because the longer this shutdown goes on, the more this problem of ICE or Palantir, funding for Palantir is in this bill. Funding for the surveillance capability of Palantir and other contractors like it is in this bill. So if you have a problem with that, and you feel like it's usually useless to contact your elected representative, now is the time to do it. Because there are conversations of leverage being had within the government, and one of the things they're not talking about is the rights that are being violated on behalf of citizens everywhere. And so now is the time to contact your senator, especially if you are represented by a Republican. But even if you're represented by a Democrat, now is the moment when Democrats have some leverage. So let's get them talking about this. If you really care about this, Theo Von, then let's get on it.
Pressure getting pressed, do you feel it now? What even happens next, I don't really know. Voice carries less, can you hear me now? Soon as I get blessed, time's running out. Pressure getting pressed. Pressure getting pressed. Feel the pressure getting pressed. Yeah. Pressure, do you feel it now? I'm just saying this.